At a conference organized by the Institute of International Business and Governance held at the Open University of Hong Kong, Professor Yochanan Altman, visiting professor from Vienna University of Economics and Business, gave the following keynote address. Professor Altman discusses strongmen, new technology, specifically AI, and anti-Semitism. He looks at recent developments in the coming to power of authoritarian leaders and how this is related to responsible leadership management. He explains how anti-Semitism manifests in some countries and why people need an enemy.
I'd like to take the opportunity to go a bit beyond the normal academic conference presentations by expanding the boundaries of the discipline that we are focusing on, which is business and management. So I'm going to dwell a bit beyond that and share with you some of the concern me today and, to my mind, bear relevance to the workplace and to the issue of people management, which is my focus. So I'm going to talk about three themes, strongmen, new technology, and anti-Semitism, and it will become self-explanatory why I think that they are so highly relevant. We all live in one interconnected world. It's always been interconnected, but probably more so now. To take the metaphor of the butterfly effect, you know that a butterfly flipping its wings in the Peruvian jungle is going perhaps to create a typhoon here in Hong Kong. And global warming, man-made, is now accepted as the ground, the reason behind the climate change, unless you are Donald Trump. It matters. It matters because he's the President of the United States. Trump has been explicit throughout his 2 years presidency that things are not what they seem. He says there are facts and there are counterfacts and there are alternative facts and there is fake news and there is media bias and basically everybody and their uncle got this ulterior motive. So the bottom line is don't trust what you see, don't trust what you hear. What does it do? What it does, it sows confusion, it creates doubts, it drives uncertainty in every aspect of life, and by extension to the workplace too. I use Brexit as a parable. It's very high now on the agenda, of course, in the UK and throughout the world. And remember, Britain used to be a great empire, you know. It used to rule here until not that far ago. And Great Britain cannot actually find a way out of the European Union because there are big issues going to be with custom checks at the ports, what you do with perishable goods, what you do with just-in-time manufacturing when companies are used to have not more than a 3 days supply in place, what you do about the already integrated defense and police and security. Space collaboration came to the fore last week. The problem with Northern Ireland and the problem with Scotland. In other words, UK, as much as may want to go it alone, it's find it almost impossible to do that. Let's take Brexit aside. Let's look at the most isolated country in the world, by definition, North Korea. So, you know, North Korea takes great pride in trying to have developed an autarkic economy to create its own path. But can it actually really go it alone? Well, not really, you see. Without Chinese support, economically and politically, and without the about 100,000 guest workers that bring in about $2 billion plus every year, North Korea would collapse. So even North Korea, the most isolationist country in the world, can't make it alone. The world we inhabit is inextricably linked. This fundamental realization has driven sustainable development as a political movement since its inception 30 years ago. I'm not a political scientist, But as I said before, what I'm using this opportunity is to try and go beyond the boundaries of our discipline and look what is happening in other areas because of this logic of we are all one world, we are all interconnected, bears about our workplace as well. So I'd like to look at really the very recent development of the last 10 years or so of the coming to power of authoritative leaders in a great number of countries, some of them very major ones, which intersects very closely with a major issue, a major discourse in responsible management about leadership, and specifically servant leadership, spiritual leadership, moral leadership. In a book that came out this year, Levitsky and Zindblad proposed 4 key tests to authoritarian behavior. To what extent the leader is respecting democracy's rules of the game, such as respecting the autonomy of the courts and commitment to free elections, the extent that a leader recognizes the legitimacy of their opponents or portrays them as criminals, foreign agents, subversive, a national security threat. Does the leader and their supporters endorse, advocate, or tolerate violence against their rivals, or refuse to condemn such violence? Does the leader support restrictions on civil liberty and on the free media, or threaten rivals with legal punitive action? So this is a table taken out of the book. It shows some of the important leaders of key countries today. So we have Russia, and we have Putin, who has been in power now for 18 years, and he scores very high on all 4 tests. We have Viktor Orban in Hungary, who developed the concept of what he calls illiberal democracy. We have Kaczynski in Poland that, again, has developed some ideas, very populist-orientated, about how to retain power. Erdogan in Turkey has been there for a long time. And, of course, Trump is a new phenomenon in the United States. The book has only come out a few months ago, but we already have 2 new entries, if you like, into the same category, potentially. One just a few weeks old, Brazil, and Italy, a couple of months ago. So we're really dealing here with a phenomena that is there, that is growing, that should concern us. What do we learn from them? It's okay to kill political opponents in Russia. It's okay to interfere with Supreme Court nominations in the case of Poland, in the case of the United States. It's okay to close a university last week in Hungary because, its views are not in line with the regime. It's okay to jail journalists and academics, Turkey, though not to kill them. That's left to Saudi Arabia. And it's okay to vilify the free press, which applies to all of these countries. Now, strongmen run not only countries, they also run companies. And some of the mightiest corporations, in terms of market dominance, disruptive power, and wealth, in brackets mostly the owner's wealth, have been established only recently. So, Amazon has been around for 25 years, Google about 20 years, Facebook 15, Uber merely 9, Telsa a bit longer. But compared to the dominance they have in the economy and in our way of life, it's incredible what they managed to do in such a short time. And the founders, owners are heroes of our time. Now, this year wasn't a very good year for them. What did we learn about these companies and their founders, owners, heroes this year? Facebook, of course, was very much in the headlines, continues to be in the headlines. They failed to curb hate speech and fake news. They are accused again and again, more and more revelations about selling personal data. Elon Musk has been embroiled with a lot of issues this year, including a fraud charge by the federal authorities in the United States. Then we have Google employees who went out at 11 o'clock all over the world. At 11 o'clock, they stopped their work in order to protest about sexual harassment. So, and Amazon, of course, Jeff Bezos, the wealthiest person on earth, estimated to be worth $150 billion. His company is notoriously a very lousy place to work at. So, what do we learn from these strongmen about the workplace? That incivility is acceptable behavior. Belittle marginal groups if you wish and can. Who shouts loudest is right. The boss is very, very rich. The workers could be very poor. But also, the new technologies facilitate new ways of workers self-organizing. Thus, these mega companies are certainly great for their owners. They also enjoy high public endorsement. But as a workplace, their workers judge them to be between tolerable and bad. None of them stands out as a great place of work. Which brings me to the second issue, which I wish to discuss, and that's the role of new technology and specifically artificial intelligence in changing the civic environment and driving a workplace culture. Artificial intelligence algorithms can create human-type learning that is faster and better than humans and unbiased too. When Deep Blue, you may remember, beat Garry Kasparov, then he was the world champion in chess, that was a big sensation. So that was, a computer program of IBM. But last year, AlphaZero, which was developed by DeepMind, a Google subsidiary, taught itself in 4 hours how to play chess and beat the top chess-playing computer program. Now, the point the Strauss to make is 4 hours, it took it to learn the rules of the game by competing against itself, running and running and running, and every time improving by teaching itself how it works. Of course, now self-driving cars are very much in the news, and of course the potentiality there is fantastic because we have over 1 million fatalities worldwide every year from car accident, by and large due to human error. Now, you take out human error out of the equation, and it's a huge improvement all around. I mean, you can argue with that. Now, that's another aspect of application of artificial intelligence, which is the very clever cameras that follow us everywhere. This is a piece I picked about Shenzhen, not far from here. The authorities name and shame people who flout road rules using CCTV AI cameras that can recognize offenders. Their faces are then displayed on large screens at crossings. In the 10 months from April 2017 to February 2018, in one junction alone, nearly 14,000 faces were displayed. If you go to Shenzhen, be aware of that. The two pictures below you will recognize. This is, of course, the two unlucky Russian assassins who went into the UK in order to kill a former spy and created an international scandal. Think about it. One day you are a secret agent, like James Bond, you roam the world with different identities, with a license to kill. The next moment, you are identified through CCTV cameras, and that's it. From now on, you are confined to live in Russia and maybe Belarus. That's it, because everywhere else you'll go, you'll be extradited as a potential criminal. So just think about what artificial intelligence does in our lives. So what does it do? What does it help us or not? Obviously, because AI is now the latest craze in human resource management. Everybody and everyone is trying to sell AI products and technologies and services to companies. And it's obvious. The hotel I'm staying here in Hong Kong has 1,600 rooms. I learned it because, of course, I couldn't sleep at night, so I bothered the night duty managers, and so he got 1,600 rooms. He employs nearly 1,000 full-time, not full-time, but permanent employees, and over 2,000 casual laborers. Now, the average turnover in hospitality is about 70% a year. I think in Hong Kong it's higher. It is much more aggressive and dynamic economy. Imagine how much an organization can save by screening applications using artificial intelligence, rather than human resource personnel sifting through files and having to interview people with the same questions, etc., etc. Of course, it could be extremely useful for providing information about company policies. For example, pension updates, where you simply log in and you find exactly where you are in your pension plan and so on. When it comes to career management, which consultancies now sell with artificial intelligence technology and performance assessment, I'm a bit more hesitant about that. But, it's early days. We don't know yet. What is certainly something to think about with concern is the unrelentless march of metrics. So now everything is measured, and we as academics know it only too well. We are measured on everything, whether it's our teaching efficiency, our research outputs, you name it. And of course, the risk then is, if you are entirely captured by metrics, is the risk of stigma. Because once, for whatever reason, you happen to deviate outside the norm of the metrics, then you are in trouble. The scandals about personal data. Now, so we talked about Facebook. Yahoo last year, if you remember, disclosed that they inadvertently let go of 3 billion pieces of identity. With banks, it happens all the time. And last week, the Marriott hotel chains revealed that 500 million customers' informations again went astray. And that's what the CNN reporting said. Consumers should work under the assumption that cyber criminals already have access to their personal information as breaches become increasingly common. So what does it help? What does it lead to? Well, I'm going to concentrate only on one aspect, and that's anxiety. Anxiety as a general malaise, I'm meaning in a clinical sense, is rising all the time. It's not a new phenomenon. So this is data that goes back to the 1950s, and it shows a meta-analysis of studies over this period between 1953 and 1993. And you can see from the graph, this applies to men, university college males in the United States. The picture for females is quite similar. You can see from the graph the increase, which is steady, consistent, and on the rise all the time, and quite significantly so. So since the end of the Second World War, we have seen a rise in anxiety level for a variety of reasons, and I won't go into them right now, but look at the latest figure. The first one in USA, this is figures from 2012, 18% of adults required professional help, that is psychologists, psychiatrists, over a 12-month period for anxiety disorders. In the UK, a survey, and that was done before Brexit, because now with Brexit, I think we are going to be in atmospheric, in stratospheric level of anxiety. 37% more of adults said that they are more frightened than in the past. But look at the last one, which is from here in Hong Kong, a survey from this year in May. 3,177 young people aged 6 to 24 were asked in a survey that was a diagnostic survey to rate anxiety. Okay, 52% are normal, but that means that 48% are not. And they range, as you can see, from mild to extremely severe. So we are into an anxiety pandemic. Which brings us to the last thing I want to discuss, and that's antisemitism. Antisemitism is the oldest hatred in the world. And the reason it's important is, and I think that the Archbishop of Canterbury says it very well. That's what he says. We have to recognize that antisemitism has been the root and origin of most racist behavior going back for the last 1,000 years. It bubbles to the surface very easily indeed. When we see it, it tells us there are strains and stresses in society. It is the canary in the mine. In other words, antisemitism is highly symptomatic that something very wrong is happening in our societies. And that's why it's important. But I'll explain the implications further why it is significant to us as a workplace. You all have heard about the massacre in the synagogue in Pittsburgh last month, the worst incident of killing Jews in the United States history. You may not have heard about what's going on in France and in the UK. Now, France and the UK are the largest Jewish populations in Europe. When I say largest, they are relatively large to the Jewish population in Europe, but in fact they are not large. In France, we are talking about a population of about 700,000, which is a bit more than 1% of the population. In the UK, it's less than 0.5% of the population. France has experienced an exodus, running away of Jews for the last 6-7 years, which has intensified in the last 2 years since the massacre in the kosher supermarket in Paris. In the UK, which has seen the capture of the opposition party, the Labour Party, by a Marxist faction, the Jewish community issued an unprecedented statement saying that if the leader of the opposition were to assume power, that would pose, unquote, an existential threat to Jewish life in Britain. Then we have the phenomena I'm mentioning here, Poland, Austria, and Sweden. Poland, Austria, Sweden, they have tiny Jewish populations. In Austria, out of a population of 8+ million, we are talking about 8,000 people. That's less than 1 in 1,000. In Poland, the proportion is even lower. We are talking about maybe 20,000 out of a population of 33 million. Now, the implication is very simple, that if you ask an Austrian or a Pole, what was the last time you met a Jew, they will have to scratch their head because they've never met one. The chance that they will meet somebody who represents less than 1 of 1,000 in a population with no obvious identifiable characteristic is 0. But all the information that we have, and we have very strong information, is that there is a very deep-seated Jewish hatred in these countries. By any, and again, we won't go into the different measurements of anti-Semitism, but by any measure, it is there. That creates a very interesting phenomena, if you want to take a neutral stand, that has been labeled as anti-Semitism without Jews. In other words, you hate somebody without actually that person being there. You hate a group without being able to identify it, which of course raises the question, well, so what are you hating, or what's the point, or why is it? Furthermore, many of the people who have these positions, if you ask them, so you don't like Jews, so is it the case you just don't like Jews? They say, no, I don't, it's not true. In other words, you have the phenomena of anti-Semitism without anti-Semites. Sweden, which has always prided itself of being a very tolerant country, and in fact, by the official measures of anti-Semitism, There is a measure that has been used by the Anti-Defamation League in the United States for about 20 years, and it's considered to be a very rigorous scale. Sweden comes extremely low. However, if you ask the tiny Jewish population in Sweden about their personal encounter with Jewish, anti-Jewish sentiment, and you compare the two figures, the difference we are talking about is 1,500%, which means it's just, we are talking about people who are not aware that they actually bear hatred towards another group. So, why do we have it? Well, because enemies are very important to our life, particularly, and now coming back to where we started, in situations of uncertainty, in situations where leaders, for their own reasons, harbor sentiments and situations of uncertainty, of ambiguity, of things are not clear-cut. So Umberto Eco put it very well by saying, well, actually, we need to invent enemies if we don't have any, because they contribute to our own identity, to our own understanding of who we are. Snyder, in the book that just came out now about Putin, the name of the book is The Road to Unfreedom, says that Putin's strategy, going back to Chechnya, was to pick an enemy. Doesn't matter who. In other words, you choose your own enemy that serves you for the moment. It's not because he was a traditional enemy, not because it is a strategic enemy. An enemy works, according to one theory that is, well-established theory, Believe in a Just World by Lerner. We have a need to believe that the world is just, that we get what we deserve, and therefore, if we don't get what we deserve, like in situation, again, of uncertainty, of economic problems, then something is wrong. And if something is wrong, then it's probably not our fault, it's somebody else's fault. So again, we need to find a culprit, we need to find an enemy. And that's why we see conspiracy theories, they mushroom in such situations. We won't go into that, but you all know about it, you all hear about it. Just an example, United States, 25% of the population believed that 9/11 was an inside job. In other words, it wasn't something that was perpetrated from the outside, but it's something that, Americans themselves created in order to achieve this or that. So conspiracy theories are part and parcel of creating enemies. Which brings us to the workplace. So diversity management, which was a way of dealing with the other, dealing with those people that are different from us, and therefore potentially could be a target for hatred, discrimination, etc., etc. Diversity management is the body of knowledge and practice that deals with it. So once upon a time, it was fairly straightforward and simple. Diversity management started with gender. Okay, so women were the other. And the challenge was of how to incorporate it into the world of work, how to make them acceptable, how to make sure that they are given the opportunities for progression, etc., etc. Then came race and ethnicity. Now it's much, much more complicated. Due to the power of social media, we have now groups rising that we didn't hear about, maybe we didn't know about. For example, pagans. So now paganism is a growing movement that seeks recognition as a faith. Last week we heard in the United Kingdom about vegans, veganism seeking a court decision whether they should be recognized as a faith. because a person that is vegan would like to take their employer to court due to discrimination at the workplace. We have a flexible gender, which is a phenomenon that is not new, but again, it's now gaining momentum because it's very convenient to share information and to share experiences and to gain credibility through the social media. So the challenge that we face at the workplace is how to deal with this increasing diversity that we are not used to it, and specifically, or more challenging, how to deal with diversity that is invisible. So, coming back to the Jews are in those countries where there are a small minority, are an example of an invisible minority. They are there, nobody knows who they are, but there are great attitudes towards them. So these are, if you like, the three horsemen of the apocalypse that I thought of presenting today: the strongmen, artificial intelligence, antisemitism. And the question which I leave as an open question is, are we amidst a perfect storm? Thank you.